Namaskar, and we welcome the eminent panelists and distinguished viewers in today's episode of Genocide Watch in January month Holocaust commemorations. Thousands years of unabated Hindu persecution and genocide by the invaders and colonizers has not only consumed Hindus bodily but gave a deafening blow to Hindu mind as well. The effect of these genocides across the length and breadth of India has been so devastating that even though Hindus continue to be in majority throughout India, yet the behavior continued as if we are a minority and in servitude of a majority. Mind space servitude has most detrimental impact on the anchors which binds the Hindu community to its thousands year old civilization. Particular section of Indians by British colonizers created a new launchpad and paved way for perpetuity of genocide upon Hindus. Genocide of Hindus at the hands of invaders and colonizers should have been the thing of past, but it continued unabated and with more vicious zeal throughout Indian subcontinent. Slaughter of Sikhs in Afghanistan, Hindus in Pakistan and Bangladesh continued amidst full glare and watch of Mother Nation State and the world. But no murmurs. The height of irony reached when India continued its muted response and watched helplessly the genocide of Hindus in its own territory, Jammu and Kashmir. Thousands of Hindus in Kashmir suffered genocide, and nearly half a million of them had to undergo exodus from Kashmir Valley during 1980-90. Intriguingly, the genocide of Hindus in Kashmir was aided, abetted, and supported by the same forces created as a milestone by leaving invaders and colonizers. Though United Nations mandates and authorizes any country in the world to act against the against even the other country abetting and aiding genocide, even if it does not take place within its jurisdiction, but it does have some amount of influence over that particular part of the land. Indian state unfortunately has stayed as a mute spectator to the genocide of millions of Hindus and Sikh population in its neighborhood and on its own country as well. The victims of genocide whose rights are absolutely guaranteed by United Nations have been left to fend for themselves, and with a procrastinated state response, reconciliation and restorative justice as solution mechanisms has actually rubbed more salt to wounds of victims. To discuss this ahead, we have a very learned visionary, Francois Gautier. He has a functional working experience as a journalist of over 40 years. He also witnessed firsthand the anti-Hindu jihadi violence at its peak in Kashmir in 1990. He has been living in India for several decades and has contributed immensely in spreading awareness about Hindus and India with his pioneering works. The Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Museum in Pune is one of such projects. We are grateful to him for joining us in commemorating Kashmiri Pandits Holocaust Month, and we welcome Francois Gautier to today's episode of Hindu Genocide Watch, where he will talk about the procrastinated responses and the way ahead for Hindus. Welcome, Francois.
Thank you very much.
So, when we are talking about the procrastinated, response of state, how do you define it? Do you agree to this that there has been the response has not been as it should have been from state of India and as well as the international community?
You see, first, I would like to give a little background. When I came to India very young, and when I started as a journalist, I started as most Western journalists do, with the same ignorance, the same prejudices, the same labels that most Western journalists apply on India. It's Kashmir that opened my eyes, actually. Uh, the Coming to Kashmir um, was like coming of age for me. Then I understood what a religion can do in the other to the other. Otherwise, probably I wouldn't have known. Probably I wouldn't have known because I see so many Western journalists and correspondents who come to India for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and go back with the same label, the same prejudices that they came from. Sometimes even, even more emphasized, even stronger. We see today uh, with Mr. Modi and the BJP that most of the Western media, from the New York Times to the Guardian to the French Le Monde, have a visceral hatred for the BJP. They come with that hatred, they come with that prejudice, and they go back even stronger. So
mm,
personal experience sometimes doesn't change people. For me, it changed me. But at the time I was covering Kashmir, it was the beginning of CNN. Mark Tully was the beacon of all journalists, both Western and Indians, a very renowned, uh, famous and intelligent, smart journalist, and everybody would follow his lead. And his lead in those days, I remember because there was only one hotel open in Srinagar. I had known Srinagar before when it was a haven of tourism, but at that time, during the time, say between 88 and 97, for 10 years nearly, Srinagar was a place of no tourism. Most of the time there was curfew, and there was only one hotel open. It was called the Aduz. It was on the Jhelum, on the band, and so we were all there. And of course, Mark Kelly was our leader. And in those days, people have forgotten, but in those days, Mark Kelly used to say, the government, the Indian government, at that it was the Congress government on top of that. The Indian government is wrongly accusing the Pakistan government of arming, fostering, financing, and throwing back, Kashmiri militants into India to create havoc. But to me, it didn't make any sense. I had one of my first visits in Kashmir. I think it was maybe in 88 or 89. There had been a Hindu temple attacked in Srinagar. So the Ganesh temple, I remember, a very small temple. It had been attacked by mortar from the banks of the Jhelum, and it was guarded, heavily guarded. So most of the journalists, most because we were a group, we were a group, and we all had these drivers, Kashmiri Muslim drivers, who were informant to both us and to the militants. So our Kashmir driver said on that particular day that you know um, there was one separatist. He's still alive today. His name will come back to me. As who was under house arrest, has escaped and is going to surface in the old Srinagar, the mosque, and give a statement. But I decided with one of my friends, his name was Tidjano Terzani, he was a Spiegel correspondent, to go to that temple because I had heard about the temple. And I met these pandits, were still in the temple, and I spoke to them. My friend was very reluctant. He wanted to go to the other side, but I spoke to them, and I was really touched by their courage, their simplicity, their gentleness, and I decided that day that there was something wrong, that Mr. Tali must be wrong. The Pakistanis were indeed arming, sheltering, training, and financing the Kashmiri Indian militants who came back to kill and maim. And then, of course, started the wave of killings of the Kashmiri Pandits, Hindus. Some of them whom I interviewed, like Dr. Tiku, like the director of the All India Radio, people whom I knew, and they were murdered often in plain sight. What must be understood also is that even at that time, Kashmiri it was a place that needed to be kept by force. The Indian army was in a camp in Srinagar, a huge fortified camp, and would only come out uh, of this camp, in force, six, seven vehicles, because even in those days, the militants were very active and very strong, and Mr. Tali had been proven wrong in time. So my experience in Kashmir, when I witnessed the exodus of the Kashmiri Hindus, gave me three lessons. The first one is that, and we've seen it elsewhere in the world after that, but in those days it was quite new that Islam, if you're not a Muslim, considers you, of course, as a kafir, to be converted and to be eventually killed or chased away. So this is what happened in Kashmir. I had interviewed earlier Benazir Bhutto twice actually, who was a very well-spoken woman, spoke flawless English, was a woman of command. I remember her sitting on a desk in Rawalpindi and Lahore, and all the men, Muslim men, standing with head bowed. So the part of the Shakti, is not only in India; it is gone to Bangladesh and to Sri Lanka, of course, and to Pakistan. So Benazir Bhutto did that famous speech of Azad Kashmir, because Pakistani politicians have one rallying point to get votes and to get support. It is Kashmir. So we have to face it that whether it is that ex-cricketer or Benazir Bhutto, they all have only one strong point. It is Kashmir. So this is why they keep on breaking up Kashmir. Also, one should remember that the loss of Bangladesh, the loss of eastern Pakistan was a huge face loss for Pakistan, and it has never recovered from that loss. And it sought to bleed India, uh, first by acquiring the nuclear bomb that Mr. Bhutto did, and secondly by Kashmir and Khalistan. We see today that the specter of Khalistan is rising up again. Of course, it is Pakistan, though the Sikhs have their own grievances, but it is mostly fueled by Pakistan. So Kashmir was a way that Pakistan was getting back at India. So the first lesson was Islam is not only a monotheistic religion, but it still believes in the 20th, then in the 20th, but today in the 21st century, that it is the only true religion and that it is its duty to convert people and eventually to kill them. So I saw that in Kashmir, and I didn't know. For me, as a Western journalist, there were bad Hindus, there were bad Muslims. All religions are the same. Hindus also can be fundamentalists. So this was wiped away in Kashmir. I saw with my own eyes. I'm a Frenchman. I go with my heart, but I also go with my mind. And my mind understood that this is what Islam was doing, and I had it under my own eyes. If you're not a Muslim, after Benazir Bhutto did Azad Kashmir speech, all the mosques in Srinagar and all over Kashmir told Hindus, convert or die. So they fled. They fled. And I saw them fleeing. Of course, the Congress accused the governor, Mr. Jack Mohan, who was a very good man, but it was not his fault. It was, the strength of Islam, who after Aurangzeb, after Akbar, after, Baba, still think today that it is their duty to convert and kill. So this opened my eye, really. This really opened my eye. My second discovery was that Hindus were wonderful people, and I still believe today I'm one of the lone defenders of Hindus among Western journalists and among Western writers. But Hindus are wonderful people. They're the only people today who believe that God can be Krishna or Mohammed or Buddha or Christ. So this is a saving grace for the 21st century and the future. But they have forgotten to fight. They have forgotten to fight. After all, there were 400,000 Hindus in Kashmir. There were many youths. So to this day, I still do not understand. Even if it was going towards their death, why not? A small group of youth of ex-army men didn't form to defend their brothers and sisters and stop them from becoming exiled in their own country, because the history of the Kashmiri Hindus, I don't like the word Pandit because it's too vague. So I always say Kashmiri Hindus. They were Hindus from the valley of Kashmir, because lots of people even in India are ignorant about the reality of Kashmir. You have Ladakh, which has a majority of Buddhists, most of them followers of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. You have Jammu, where there used to be a majority of Hindus, but this is slowly being eaten away by the Rohingyas and the Muslim from the elsewhere in Kashmir. And then you have the Valley of Kashmir, where there was 1 million Hindus in 1900, according to the census, and today there may be only a few left. So I'm talking about the Valley of Kashmir, and I'm talking about the Hindus of the Valley of Kashmir who left their ancestral land, property, everything behind them out of sheer violence and terror. This is what terrorism does, it chases out or kills people. So my second point is that why didn't Hindu fight? And my third point is nobody cared really. I mean, I was the only one who thought, let me do an exhibition at least. And I did an exhibition on the plight of the Kashmiri Hindus, which I opened in Habitat Center in Delhi, maybe in 2004, 2005, with L.K. Advani, um, who was one of the few Hindu leaders who cared actually and helped me to sponsor that exhibition. And then I took it around India and then put it in my museum. I think it's the only permanent exhibition on the Kashmiri Pandits in a museum. I even took it to the Congress, to the American Congress in Washington. There was at that time there was a friendly congressman. His name was Pelod, I think, Mr. Pelod, and he helped me to get it to the U.S. Congress, and he helped the U.S. Congress to pass a resolution, saying that there's been a genocide in Kashmir. Though he didn't go further than that. So my third conclusion was that why is there so little? There is so much for Palestine. I just came from France, and I see everywhere the genocide in Palestine. Let us unite for Palestine. Let us give money for Palestine. But there is none for Hindus. This is the only country in the world where you know Indians are living. Still a few left today. I mean, in those days, my wife and I visited a lot of refugee camps in Jammu, but also in Delhi, where Kashmiri Hindus were living under very difficult conditions. Thanks to Mr. Advani, it is the only country in the world where actually Indians are refugees in their own country. You can say Palestine, are refugees elsewhere. They say that Israel belongs to them, but here in India, you have Hindus who are refugees in their own country and who have scattered all over the world, a bit like the Jews did after the sack of the Temple of Jerusalem and become refugees all over the world. So it is a story that touched me immensely and still today touches me from a human point of view, but also from a political point of view, because Kashmiri Hindus are not a big lot, even though it's a huge number, say 400,000 refugees, and in 1900 if there were a million, then there are many others scattered all over India and the world. But nobody cares, and even the present government doesn't seem to be able to do anything. I know that they're good willing, but on the one hand, it is impossible to send them back to the Valley of Kashmir. Let's not talk about Jammu, because the Valley of Kashmir is the heart and the center of this problem. The Valley of Kashmir is the center. So unless you send them under armed escorts day and night, there is no way they can go back. What could be done is what the Chinese did in Tibet. What the Chinese did in Tibet was very smart. And once more, China shows that even in dictatorship, it is smarter than India. So what the Chinese did in Tibet is they offered poor farmers, hand farmers from other parts of China, land, free land in Tibet, and subsidies, and the backing, of course, of the People's Army, the Chinese army, to protect them. So they got Chinese to come and settle in Tibet, and slowly, so Tibet, the resistance that was in Tibet got faded out, and slowly the Tibetan language, the Tibetan customs got wiped out, because the Chinese, it became Chinese. So why can't the Indian government do the same thing in the Valley of Kashmir? And I'm sure there are poor Biharis, poor UPites, poor people from Andhra Pradesh, who are desperate. And if you offer them free land in numbers, there has to be, you have to offer it to 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 people, and you have to put a lot of money in it. But it's feasible. The Chinese have shown that it's feasible. Tibet is much higher and much more difficult environment. So if the Indian government had the will, it could do that. Of course, there'd be a huge backlash in the Western press, even the Indian press. All the Indian intelligentsia will talk about, colonization or whatever. But it seems to me the only way, and I don't understand why this government doesn't pursue this avenue, because we know that the alliance with this Mufti was a catastrophe. I mean, from the beginning, I thought that it was totally illogical to do that, and we see today that Mr. Amit Shah goes to Kashmir and Mr. Modi goes to Kashmir, and they promise jobs and hundreds of millions of rupees. But the Congress has done it also for decades. And my understanding of the Kashmiri Muslim is that they don't care. They don't care. They will take the money, but that's all. Their hatred of India will continue. And I remember in my days as a reporter in Kashmir, meeting nice Kashmiri Muslims, educated, nice, retired generals, retired, high school teacher, retired high court judges, and they would talk to me because, if I'm a Westerner, that means I'm pro Kashmiri Muslim. They would presume that, but after some time they would say, no, we feel more comfortable with Islam. They will say it in a nice way. We feel more comfortable with Islam. This is why we want to be with Pakistan. We hate India. We don't feel Indian. I mean, I'm talking about nice, educated Muslim from the Valley of Kashmir. After some time, we tell me we hate India. We don't feel Indian. We our first allegiance is to Islam. So going to Kashmir and making high-profile visit and pouring billions of rupees of subsidies to Kashmir, which has been going on. Kashmir is the Valley of Kashmir again, is the most subsidized state in India. I mean, Kashmiri Muslims, many of them are employed by the government. I haven't worked in decades. There might be a little bit of change now, but they just got the salaries, while hating India. it's a complete, it's a complete ignorance. So the ignorance of the politician about the reality of Kashmir or the Valley of Kashmir is something that still baffles me today. And I thought the BGP would do better, because after all, Mr. Amit Shah is a hard man. He's been to jail. He knows the reality, but I don't see any chance. I know, again, it's a difficult problem, but again, look at the Chinese. They saw, in spite of the entire, Western world, condemning them because they have the muscle power, because they have the economic power. They just went ahead with what they thought was right. And Tibet, they consider Tibet part of them. They faced, in Tibet, they faced a lot of hurdles. At some point, the CIA was supporting the Tibetan revolutionary, the Tibetan armed. There was an armed movement in Tibet which was quite tough and quite good, supported by the CIA. And supported by the American, financed by the American government. But they went ahead and they did it. I mean, today everybody goes to Tibet as a tourist. It is not Tibet anymore. It is China. You can call it Chinese Tibet. So why can't the Indian government do everything? Why does the Indian government always care about what the Western press will say? This is another thing that baffles me, not only as regard to the Kashmir problem, but also as regard generally. We know that the Western press hates Mr. Modi. In France, I tried to publish a biography of Mr. Modi, because no doubt he's going to be re-elected in 2024, and no doubt he's going to left his imprint on India. But nobody's interested. They all hate Mr. Modi. and they hate the BGP. They think it's a government of, dangerous, worse than the Muslims, more dangerous than Islam, which is a total aberration. It's a total untruth. But so why does the BGP government still try to please these people? It baffles me, that every time Hindus come to power, I don't know about the past, because there was Shivaji Maharaj, there was Maharana Pratap, there were so many great warriors, who fought against all odds. If you take Shivaji Maharaj, he fought with a few hundred men, the most powerful army of the world, that of Aurangzeb, which had the most powerful weapons of the world at that time, more than the West. Aurangzeb was the most powerful man in the world at that time, and Shivaji Maharaj, just his wits and courage, and intelligence, and a few hundred people, defeated. You can say that he defeated that man because of Shivaji Maharaj. India from Bombay to Kanyakumari, has a more softer culture, has preserved its culture, preserved its temples, has preserved its spirituality. That is thanks to Shivaji Maharaj. So why can't the BJP government just plow ahead with what it feels is right, regardless of what Amnesty International or Mr. Biden or Mr. Macron, or the New York Times, who all hate him. They all hate him. They all think that he's a dangerous man. I mean, I came back day before from Paris, and I have heard it from my sister, from my cousin, from everybody, because they read it in the papers, that this man is so dangerous. He's worse than Islam. So why can't Mr. Modi plow ahead, and start, getting farmers from UP? And this is the only way the Kashmiri Pandits are going to be able to return. If there is a massive presence of other Indians, non-Muslim Indians in the Valley of Kashmir, it seems to me the only way. I don't see any other way unless Pakistan and India reunite, but I don't see it in the future. Sri Aurobindo said, I'm a disciple of Sri Aurobindo, and he said that the partition of India was a mistake, that as long as this partition remains, troubles and strife and eventually catastrophe like a nuclear war could happen. And he said the partition must go. So, yes, one day, definitely, either out of economic compulsion or because Pakistan will implode from inside, having unleashed so much terror, not only towards India, but onto the world, and so that it'll fall back into India's lap. But till then, I don't see any other solution of Kashmir. Pouring billions of dollars, or trying to make an alliance with a party like Mrs. Mufti will not work, and it showed it's not work. So yes, I'm a supporter of the Kashmiri Hindus, but I wish they would be more united. If you look at the Jews in America or elsewhere, they're not more. You can't say that they are more the Kashmiri Pandits. I don't know how many Jews are there in the US, maybe a million, I don't know, a million, 2 millions, but they have a huge lobby, because they're all united under one umbrella. So their political lobby is huge. They do museums. I don't see any museums of the Hindu Holocaust. I mean, the Hindu Holocaust is not only in Kashmir. It goes from Hindu Kush, till Mumbai 2011, and when Timur killed 100,000 Hindus in a day, where Babur did that and Aurangzeb did that. It's a huge Holocaust. Why is there no Hindu Holocaust museum? Because Mr. Modi wants to be seen as a prime minister of everybody. It's good, but at the same time, unless the Hindus propagate their Holocaust, propagate their suffering, how will the world know? How will the world understand? So there should be a Hindu Holocaust museum. There can be a Muslim Holocaust. Why not? I mean, Muslims were the biggest harbingers of Holocaust, but if they want to do their own Muslim Holocaust, why not? Let them do it. After all, Aurangzeb killed his father. He killed his brother Dara Shikoh, had him, decapitated because he was an apostate. So they can do that. But why is there no Hindu Holocaust museum where the Kashmiri Pandits, of course, would find their place in India, in Washington? There are so many rich people in India. India is full of money. People think of India as a poor country, but there are billionaires in India by the hundreds. I'm talking about Hindu billionaires. Where do their money go? They give to Oxford, to some chair which will, which will actually downgrade India, and talk about human rights in India. They give money to Harvard. They give money to, but why can't they do Hindu Holocaust? I have a Hindu Holocaust exhibition in my museum. I think it's the only one in the world. When the Dalai Lama came, because I'm a lover of the Dalai Lama, and So I did an exhibition on the Tibetan genocide, because there's been a huge Tibetan genocide too. But the Tibetans have a Tibetan genocide museum in Dharamsala next to the Dalai Lama. So anyway, he came to inaugurate that exhibition, and the Dalai Lama has a lot of security, as much as the Indian president, because he's under threat by the Chinese. So before his visit, the intelligence bureau came, the IB came, this came, that came, and so one of the first people that came from the intelligence bureau, they were two Muslims, and they saw my Hindu Holocaust exhibition and the Kashmiri Pandit exhibition, and they reported to the superior. And my wife and I were told that, unless you remove that exhibition, uh, we'll make a show cause notice against you and you can go to jail. So that would have jeopardized the entire visit of the Dalai Lama. So we removed the exhibition and the Dares, and I put it back after the Dalai Lama visit. So of course, it requires some courage, but this is a powerful government. Mr. Modi is a powerful man. I think he's probably the most powerful prime minister that India has had. People like Manmohan Singh were just fingertip ministers. They had no clue of. But Mr. Modi has a hand on everything. Every important decision today comes to Mr. Modi and the PMO. The PMO has, India needs to be decentralized. I'm a believer of decentralizing India, but under Mr. Modi, though I'm an admirer of Mr. Modi, and he's done so many extraordinary things, but his PMO today controls everything. The ministers, can't open their mouths now. They cannot spend more, I don't know, than 5 crores without the PMO's approval. And every important decision comes to the PMO and eventually on Mr. Modi's desk. So why can't this be told to Mr. Modi that this is one way to bring back the Kashmiri Pandits to their homeland? An extreme injustice, which is unique in the world, is that you start Indianizing the Valley of Kashmir, with the help of army. There's a heavy army presence in Kashmir, as I have said. So, with the help of the army, like the Chinese did, you offer land, you know, for instance, the land of the Kashmiri Pandit that was stolen by the Kashmiri Muslims, and the house, you offer them to poor people who have nothing to lose. They will come. Eventually, you arm them, give them weapons, which the
Hey,
Chinese did in Tibet.
let me intervene, Francio. You raised two important questions. The observations which you had actually experiences which made you to think like that. One was that why didn't Hindus of Kashmir retaliated? Why didn't we pick up the guns at that time when this exodus, this genocidal assault was made on Kashmiri Hindus? Firstly, we need to understand the demographics of it, demographic situation. 2% of the total population scattered all over India. So there was no communication lines between the people. The people who were living in South Kashmir were not aware what is happening in North of Kashmir. Secondly, very importantly, let me add to your information and to the information of everybody else that yes, there were some young boys who actually worked with the armed forces. And one of my friends, because he has decided to come out in open, rest of them are not very sure that whether they want to give their names or not. His name is Rakesh Hundu. He's a dear friend of mine. He was part of the anti-insurgency regiment in 1990 itself, but it was government of India which banished that unit. Thereafter, then, when we talk about anti-insurgency operations in Kashmir, which was actually led by the Kokapare, the insurgents, it was actually the brainchild of Captain S.K. Tikku, who was the brain behind these operations. What happened to them after 1996 when they government of India handed over government to National Conference under the leadership of Farooq Abdullah? Slowly and gradually, most of them were eliminated. Now, whosoever is saved, nobody knows about them. Where are they actually today? So it is not because only because of they didn't pick up out of cowardice or anything else. And let us not also forget this: from last 700 years there has been a continual genocidal assault on Hindus of Kashmir. And
Right.
one of the techniques to execute genocides is softening the psyche and the victims, the setup, the sociological setup. They have been softening that. When we talk about when we talk, do you know, in I think during Shah Mir's period, it is written that Lavanyas were the the valiant community. Do you know how they were softened by Shah Mir, Mir Hamdan? He got
No,
Muslim
no, I
girls.
don't. Won't.
he, he got Muslim girls to marry into these Lavanya tribe, and slowly and gradually they softened them and subsequently converted them. They were the warriors at that time. So
Hmm.
these are the techniques which are being employed by the genocidaries. And now, when you are talking about moving, changing the demographies of Kashmir, recently last year itself, 2021, there were around 2.5 lakh Hindus, and not actually Hindus, Indians, in which came from Bihar or Madhya Pradesh or UP, and were working as laborers in labor in Kashmir. Three killings, three or four killings, and the threats when Golgappawala was killed, that Bindru was killed, and thereafter, majority, there was a silent exodus yet again. I'm talking about, I have covered it. No
Yeah,
other media covered it. We covered it. We have the videographs. We videographed it actually, how they were putting up near railway station. No
hmm,
mainstream media covered it. Government did not help them. They were helped by the local volunteers, and Panun Kashmir was one of the social organizations which helped them, provided them food and shelter, etc. So it's not that easy that they bring in people. You are dealing with 97% who are Islamized, radicalized,
sure.
and then there's a country which is abetting and aiding them. The country believes that it's a milestone. Not that the mission is not complete. Mission is Ghazwa Hind, converting entire India into Darul Islam. So, having said so, don't you think the one of the ways which we are being suggesting to through when in 1991 Mark Darshan resolution was adopted by exiled Kashmiri Hindu community, we suggested that Kashmir should be divided into two parts. Let Jahlim be the the boundary, the dividing point, north and east of Jahlim. That will provide a geopolitical foothold to India. That will actually provide India an opportunity to bring in many other people. If it is centrally administered, then government of India can bring in many other people into that fold, and from there they can actually stop this genocidal attrition and attack. What is your
Sure.
take on that?
No, no, I think it's a very good proposal. The only thing that we need to think about the Chinese angle. Now, the Chinese, a war between China and India is a possibility. If there is a war in the world that can erupt in the 21st century, it will be a war between India and China because China is relentless, ruthless, and doesn't fear India and thinks that it can get away with anything. So eventually, whether it is limited war or a full-fledged war, we do not know. But India needs to think from a strategic point of view. Already, China has been taken over Tibet. It can sweep down on the plains of Assam from Tibet. If you divide Kashmir in two and leave one part to the Muslims, definitely Pakistan will use it, and the Chinese, being a close ally of Pakistan, will use it and can sweep also open another front. So no, I think that India should retain the entirety of Kashmir, and to divide it in two, though it is a good idea because it would allow the Kashmiri Pandits to return on a more Hindu-dominated part of Kashmir. It, from a strategic point of view, from the point of view of the Chinese aggression, is not a good idea because. China has surrounded India from everywhere. It is not only Tibet, but it's also Pakistan, Kashmir, in Sri Lanka. They have a huge presence. In Burma, they have a huge presence. In Nepal, of course. Yeah, so India needs to think about China is a greater enemy at the moment than Islam. I feel that the number one enemy. Mr. Doval asked me once, "Who do you think is a greater enemy of India?" Pakistan or China, and I didn't hesitate. I said China, and he agreed. Pakistan is a volatile country. It's not a democracy. It's a small country. True, it's got nuclear bombs, but it knows that if it attacks India, it will be wiped out of the earth. The nuclear arsenal of India is 10 times that of Pakistan. So No, I don't think Pakistan is a more important enemy, but China is. So, in that perspective, Kashmir, has a different coloring. Kashmir strategic uh, for India. Of course, Kashmiri Kashmiri Hindu problem, humanitarian problem is a priority, but China is the enemy, and India needs to be seen strategically, and Kashmir is very important. It's a very, very important for India to preserve the entirety of Kashmir. In case of another war with Pakistan, it would be good to then take over the whole of Kashmir. That's what Mrs. Gandhi should have done, because she defeated she defeated the entire Pakistan army and made 100,000 prisoners. She had Pakistan at her toes. She could have done anything. She could have, she could have, taken parts of Pakistan. She could have done anything, but she chose, in a true Hindu, you know, like before her, so many Prithviraj Chauhan, had forgiven Gauri twice, and the third time he was defeated. So in the same way, Mrs. Gandhi, I mean, I like Mrs. Gandhi. I can't accuse her of anything, but she should have taken that opportunity to seize buffers of Pakistan that could have protected India. So if there's another war with Pakistan, I hope Mr. Modi will have that wisdom, that if you take the whole of Kashmir, then it becomes an easier problem probably.
When by this logic, then the division of Ladakh was much more dangerous if we see the Chinese angle. But still, I think once if we even strategically, have a analytical view over this creation of a geopolitical foothold in Kashmir, it is going to strengthen India in Kashmir, Bharat in Kashmir, and now check out, you have 100% population, which is not in favor of you. You have a population that is hostile to the idea of India, the ideal idea of pluralism. But by creating any such geopolitical foothold, it gives actually a strategic strength to the idea of India. Now, when we're talking about this genocide of Hindus and the procrastinated responses, you see, 400 million. It is the figure given by Farish, a Persian historian, 15th and probably in 16th century. So the count is of 400 million. And then, do you think that since the magnitude of the horror is so high that whenever one tries to comprehend it, it just somewhere
No,
makes
no,
you
no,
makes you
no, no.
unwell.
I don't
Yeah.
think. If you look at the massacre of the Jews by Hitler, and there is ample documents now, films and evidence of survivors. It's you can't believe that humanity can do this to humanity. But it's a stark reminder to the world that, because people have died, everybody had died. All the perpetrators and all those who were persecuted or killed, they all have gone. So we need to remind the world of what monstrosity can do, and definitely there were enough monsters during the invasions of India. We talked about Timur and Babur and Aurangzeb, so many more, and we can talk today about Kashmir too. That it can be an example to the world, that should not be repeated. Why is it not taught to Indian students? That the Hindu genocide, was one of the greatest. And after all, most of the Muslims today in India and Kashmir were converted, and their families suffered, they were killed. Eventually they converted, and 6, 7 centuries later they forgot that they were Hindus. But even in Kashmir, the population, uh, amongst the Muslim population, only 3-4% are genuine descendants of Persians or Afghans or who conquered Kashmir. The rest are all converted Hindus, either from lower caste or even from higher caste, who were coerced into conversion. So it should be up to the government to change, the history books. And I'm surprised that after 7.5 years of BJP rule, I have wished the BJP to come to power. I knew the BJP 25 years ago when they were outcast. I knew well Mr. Mulimana Joshi, Mr. Advani, Mr. Vajpayee. When nobody thought they would, the entire media, Indian media, would make fun of them. I remember when Mulimana Joshi went to raise the Indian flag in Srinagar, which today would be thought as something glorious. The entire Indian media made fun of him. So I knew these people for such a long time, and I wished them to come to power. I was not sure they would come to power, but they did come to power. So now that they are in power, and they've been brought to power by Hindus, I think Mr. Modi himself has been elected by 97% Hindus. Very few Muslims and Christians would have voted for Mr. Modi, maybe 3-4%. All the rest are Hindus, from the Dalit to the Brahmin, from the Kashmiri Pandits to, the Kshatriyas. So it is time for Mr. Modi to repay that debt. We see that when the Congress comes to power, or when Mr. Mamta Banerjee comes to power, she caters to the people who have elected them. Mr. Mamta Banerjee keeps catering to the Muslim because she knows that with the Muslim vote, she's going to get re-elected. She does it in a very cynical, and very, not a very nice way, but she does it, and I think this is real politics. But we don't see the BJP doing that. I have met 4 education ministers, from Mrs. Smriti Irani to Mr. Javadekar to Mr. Nishank Pokriya, and I've even met the new one, Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan. They're all good willing, but they do nothing. In 3-4 years, 2-3 years, nothing. There's no chant in history books. There is no chant in the Aryan invasion theory, which is still the foundation stone of all history book. There is no chant in anything. So, I mean, I'm a little, though I'm a defender of India. After 7.5 years of the BJP, I'm a little disillusioned by how little has been done for the Hindus, because after all, right, this is a democracy of diversity. There are Parsis and Sikhs and Muslims, and we understand that. We understand that Mr. Modi needs to be the prime minister of all Indians. He can't be seen as the prime minister of Hindus. We understand that, but it looks sometimes as still like it was under the Congress. The minorities get priority, and the Hindus are put on the back burner. And this is true also for the Kashmiri Pandits. So I'm a little disappointed, and remaining a supporter of Mr. Modi, because I know he's doing great things otherwise. But this is the country of the Hindus. The Hindus have made this country great. The Hindus are the only one who say that God can manifest at different times using different names, using different scriptures. The Hindus are the only one who can go to a church, go to a mosque, go to a Sikh temple and feel that they're seeing God. I don't know any other nation in the world that can do that. The Christian still think that only Jesus Christ is the true God. Though now the Christians have opened a little bit more than but the Muslims still think that only Allah is great, and it is my duty to convert everybody. Okay, we understand if a Muslim says, I think Allah only is great, but okay, let me live in peace with my neighbor. Maybe that happened in Kashmir for many decades or many centuries. I'm not sure about that, because there have been many pogroms in Kashmir throughout the centuries. But if a Muslim would say, okay, Allah only is the only God, but okay, I accept that others may, worship false gods, but I'm not going to fight them for that. That would be fine. But it is not so, and we see that as far as Christianity is concerned, Christianity is still sending missionaries to India to convert, Hindus to the true God. And Mr. Modi went to the Pope and invited him to India. This is great. This shows his Hindu tolerance and Hindu openness. But the Pope is going to come and say, like the previous one came when Mr. Vajpayee invited him. They're going to say, India is the next, land of conversion. It's the next haven for Jesus Christ. That's what he's going to say. And more or less openly. So why not a Hindu Holocaust museum where the Kashmiri Pandits' genocide would be shown, in black and white? Why can't the government of India sponsor that? What would be wrong? I mean, it can even, it doesn't have to do it directly. It can have an organization that does it so that it is not openly the government of India. Why not, uh, can't they be in Paris or in Washington or in London? There are so many Nehru Cultural Center which just cater to Bharatnatyam and other things which are of no irrelevance today. Have Hindu Holocaust exhibition. My Hindu Holocaust exhibition I took around the world because Shri Ravi Shankar saw the film, and the world remained silent, made by Ashok Pandit, and started crying. And then he saw my exhibition, and he took it with him all over the world, including to the U.S. Congress and Parliament in Scotland, in Israel, everywhere. Why can't the Indian government do that? This government looks like it's a you know it just wants to cater to public opinion, but Hindus are still 1.2 billion in the world. With the Muslims and the Christians, the third largest community in the world. They have a huge brain power. They have a huge money power because Hindus, wherever they go, they do well. The Kashmiri Pandit, wherever it is gone, they have done well. Uh, why not use that? I'm flabbergasted actually. After so many years of the exodus of the Kashmiri Pandit, nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. And once I took my Kashmiri Pandit exhibition to London with my wife, and we found a very prestigious place. It was the Commonwealth Club, next to the British Parliament. And Amnesty International was just a kilometer away. So, I called. I have I work with big papers, so I still could, call these people. And I said, look, come and see the exhibition. And the lady refused. I forgot her name. She was the head of Asia for Amnesty. She refused to come. And then somehow I got one guy of the Times of London to come with great difficulty. He came, looked, he didn't say a word. He looked at the entire exhibition, which is a very powerful exhibition. Didn't say a word. And then he took me to a pub for a glass of beer, and he said, "This is rubbish." I felt like crying. I mean, I put so much. My wife and I put so much effort and love, and this guy, the Times of London guy, who colonized India, whose country colonized and bled India for 3 centuries, told me this is rubbish. I felt like crying, so I called Shrishi. I said, I was half crying. I said, "Should I give up? Should I just forget about this?" It just, I put so much energy and love, and it brings no money. I mean, today I'm a journalist of no financial means because my entire life I have, done defending this great country that is India. But I see that the people who are in power today, politicians have no gratitude. That is a fact. That is a fact. When Mr. Modi was after Godhra, when Mr. Modi was attacked, uh, not only by Indian media, by the Western media, and still today he's paying that price, as a murderer. I wrote in, to New York Times, I wrote in my French newspaper that it is not true. There were 32 Hindus, armless children uh, and and women who were burnt like animals in the train because they had just come from doing some puja in Ayodhya. This is what triggered the riots. It is not that Mr. Modi unleashed, his goons to kill Muslims for no reason. There was a terrible thing, and if my wife had been burnt in the train like that, like an animal, I would also go down the street, for God's sake. I'm a Frenchman, I would go and kill, there is no doubt. But nobody understood. And still today, Mr. Modi, is accused of being a murderer. But now that he's in power, he's forgotten the people who defended him. And he's forgotten that people who defended him are saying, look, Mr. Modi, why don't you do this? Why don't you do a Hindu Holocaust museum? Why don't you? No, we don't get. I mean, there are few of us, who are staunch defenders of Mr. Modi in his darkest times, but today, it's very difficult to reach out to him.
Yeah, do you think that there's a convention, Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, which is a United Nations convention, and India is a signatory of the convention as well as it has ratified it in Parliament in 1959. Do you think this is the
Yes,
right
yes.
time? This is the right time to bring in such an such a
Yes, it is.
legislation. And in fact, Parliament
Definitely.
Kashmir has proposed, drafted a bill and proposed, and it has been sent all to all the member parliaments of India. What's
Yes.
your take on this? Do
Yes,
you
it is. It is. But you need the Indian government to agree. Only Mr. Modi can give that word. You see, now you have a government where every minister is scared to take a decision. This is the old Indian system, old bureaucratic system. Every minister is scared to say something out of the blue because they've been told to keep their mouth shut. So only Mr. Modi has the power to say, yes, let's do it. And if he says yes, then everybody will follow. But you need to reach out to Mr. Modi. I don't know, maybe a delegation of Kashmiri Hindus, get received by him, and you bring a plan and say, Mr. Modi, this is what you should do. And let him say no. But, there's a good chance that he could say yes. Okay, let's go ahead.
This bill has reached his office, and I don't know what would be its fate, but hopefully, we are very confident that one day it will see the light of the day. We have a question from Mr. Vikram Razdan, who says, "How to get Modi to drop the Gandhiwadi policy of giving special privileges and ignore Hindu voters, not even recognize Kashmiri Hindu genocide?" So,
Oh, but you see, ultimately, Mr. Modi will come back to the Indian people when he needs to be. Normally, he said, that uh, above 65, you should not be re-elected or be a minister. So I don't know whether he will represent himself again in 2024. But anyway, his party will come back to the Hindus in 2024 and UP elections. And there have been signs that some of the Hindu voters are disillusioned with the BJP. So that needs to reach him. I mean, there has to be enough. I think the social media is a powerful tool, though still not as powerful as the mainstream media. I think Mr. Modi must be reading every day the Times of India, the Hindu, or he must be getting someone, to show him the important articles. Uh, but the social media is one tool that can be used to tell Mr. Modi that we are your voters. We are the one who voted you to power, and you seem to ignore us. You seem to give preference to minorities. You seem to prefer to go to you know the wedding of some Bollywood star or some important cricketer and cry when a Dalit is commits suicide, but keep quiet when sadhus are brutally murdered in the most violent manner. Why is it sad? Why is it so? But I don't see many of these questions on the social media. I mean, the supporters of Mr. Modi, some of them have misgivings. I know that some of them have misgivings, but even they keep quiet because it is true that if the Congress comes back to power, it is a million times worse. So Mr. Modi is still a million times better than the Congress in terms. He's a honest politician. He's a hard-driving politician. He has done reforms that are important to India, though they've been diluted. His Swachh Bharat movement, which was a great, it's such an important and great movement. I shuttle between Delhi and Pune for my museum and Pondicherry. It's gone. It's gone. If you go to Bangalore, there are mountains of trash, lying everywhere. It is gone. Uh, the bureaucracy is, diluting Mr. Modi's reforms. And also, we see that uh, Mr. Modi has been accused of being a dictator. And I've always fought against that because he's been democratically elected. I kept saying in France, when French people were saying, "Oh, he's a fascist, he's a dangerous man," but he's been elected by at least 400 million Indians. Isn't that democracy? But we see today that the reform, for instance, the banking reforms, it is true that there's a lot of cheating in India, there's a lot of black money, but banking is more and more difficult. There are more and more rules now because I have a trust, my wife and I have a trust for the museum, and there are more and more rules which makes it difficult to do business in India. I know many NRIs that have tried to come back because they want to come back to India, and coming back to India, they found it so difficult that they went back to the US or to China because China has shown that if you make banking and investing easy, people do come. But it is not the case in India. It's becoming more difficult to do business than under the Congress. So, but this doesn't reach Mr. Modi because as a guru, I have seen it around gurus, gurus are told only what they want to hear. So Mr. Modi is told only what he wants to hear. He's got a PMO around him, very intelligent people, but they all from the Nehruvian mind. And you have to understand that, you know, even the top bureaucrats in India, I have a Nehruvian mind. They would serve the British, they would serve the Indian, they would serve the Hindu, they would serve anybody. They don't have the Hindu mind. They have a Nehruvian mind. So the people around Mr. Modi, bright, intelligent people, tell him what he wants to hear. So where does he get, a sound that, the Kashmiri Hindus are unhappy because nothing is happening to them? Where do I get the sound that your Swachh Bharat movement has gone to the dogs because, it has been, diluted. The more you go south, the more it is diluted. Where do they get the sound that, banking now, there are more and more rules, FCRA rule, this rule, that makes it extremely difficult for a Westerner to invest in India. Nobody tells him. I actually had proposed to him. Uh, I had some access to him. I proposed to him that, let me bring you people who will tell you something different, every month, about business, about Swachh Bharat, about, foreigners, about, but this was never accepted. So he's, in Delhi, which is far away from the rest of India, he's surrounded by so much security also, so many bureaucrats, so he lived, in Gujarat. He had access to so many people. We met him in Gujarat. I met him several times in Gujarat. He used to meet so many people in Gujarat. There was less security. It was more central. But now he only gets to hear, a very sanitized versions of things. So it's up to the Indians. I'm a Westerner, I'm a journalist. Though I'm an OCI, I'm still a foreigner. It's up to Hindus to tell him, that to reach out to him through social media or through delegations like the Kashmiri Hindus, that, sir, this is not as you think. Things are not as you think. There is a dissatisfaction amongst many Hindus that their temples are still under control, whereas mosques and churches, are totally free. And Hindus see it as a grave injustice. Someone has to tell him.
Someone has to tell him. And there's a question from Mr. Shalendra Emma. What about reversal of genocide?
What does reversal of genocide mean?
Reparation. How should we, to
Or you mean
should
reparation? Yeah, of course,
reparation?
of course, of course, of course. I mean, the Kashmiri Pandits should be given back either the land or proportionately all the land and the wealth that they have lost. We saw with the Jews that after the Second World War, the Swiss banks, which had ordered many of the Jewish money given by Jews who thought they would survive, and then they died and nobody was there to claim, were forced to dish out money. And we saw that, uh, like art paintings, Jewish people were very rich in Europe and they had many priceless arts. Some of them got restored to the owner. So yes, restoration is up to again, up to the Indian government, and to Mr. Modi. There has to be restoration because not only Kashmiri Hindus lost their land, their houses, their property, but their dignity also. Dignity is priceless. Dignity there's no price. You can't put price on dignity. So this is something that Mr. Modi should understand. And anybody in India, whether the Congress or they should understand that, losing their dignity is something that, you know, affects your whole psyche, and generation after generation. So yes, yes, there have to be a reversal of genocide.
Mr. Nitin Dar asks, do you think Modi government is denying Hindu genocide like the Congress and other political class?
No, I don't think so. I think there are many good people, in the BJP government. I'm thinking about someone like Nirmala Sitharaman or Mr. Gadkari. Good people, good. Who came from the grassroots. Who were RSS people, I'm thinking about the vice president, Mr. Naidu, and even the president was untouchable. But the problem is, once they come to power, they come into a system that was created by the Congress. I'm talking about Mr. Naidu. I want to say something about him because my wife and I brought our exhibitions to Delhi, Indira Gandhi Art Center, which is a very prestigious place, and we asked Mr. Naidu to inaugurate it. It was exhibition on Aurangzeb and Darashuko to show Aurangzeb as a monster and Darashuko as an enlightened Sufi. Oh, Mr. Naidu knew me. He knew me from before. He knew my books. He had some respect for me, so he agreed. But these people came to us and said, "No, no, you put only Darashuko. Forget about Aurangzeb. It is too controversial." That's the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened is that there's a protocol for the vice president. You have to stand when he comes. You have to salute in a certain way. You can't enter the room where he's going to stay. We're going to have tea for 24 hours. All kind of ridiculous things. So when Mr. Naidu came, I'm a Frenchman. I'm not scared. So I told him, "Sir, are you aware of all this?" And he said something very, very interesting. He said there is a blue book, done by the Congress of what the vice president should do, and I'm bound by that blue book. Unless there is a parliament session and we change everything, I'm bound by that blue book. Oh, the same thing is true of all the ministers today of the BJP, that they function in a system made by the Congress. That means they have one PA, two PS, three under PS, four under PA. Then there is, the secretary, the guy who picks up the phone. So to reach a minister, as it was in the Congress, is extremely difficult today. To reach Mr. Modi is impossible. I mean, unless you know someone in the PMO or know someone, it's impossible, impossible. But to reach a minister, even if you have a genuine business with the minister, is very difficult, because first you have to pick up the phone and go through the peon, and the peon has to connect to the PA of the PA was to connect. It's endless. And even though I have good connections, uh, and I have rich ministers, I know that it's extremely difficult, but still we need to we need to reach out to these people and tell them the truth.
Thank you so much, Francia. And the thing which I learned is that if this reparation of genocide has to see the light of the day, we have to get rid of this blue book. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
And
I'm remain a friend. I remain a supporter of
you
the
have been a
Kashmir,
friend. Thanks a lot. Thanks a
and I
lot. Thank you.
remain, and I remain.
एंड सभी व्यूअर्स का भी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. कल फिर मिलेंगे इसी टाइम पे, इसी चैनल पे. कल हम बात करने वाले हैं कि हिंदू रेजिस्टेंस अगेंस्ट जेनोसाइडल असॉल्ट्स, और हमारे साथ जुड़ेंगे प्रोफेसर रमेश्वर मिश्रा पंकज जी. तब तक के लिए नमस्कार, धन्यवाद.